Hey guys, Erwan here coming at you from Landers, and I'm drinking a cup of joe. Now this is considered the second most consumed beverage in the world right after water, and that is why we are talking about coffee today. So a lot of people drink it for lots of different reasons, depending on where you find yourselves in the world. For some people, it's simply a morning routine. Others actually want a highly concentrated beverage filled with caffeine to wake them up. Others use it for digestion purposes only. And then if you're like me, you use it for all the above reasons and you just drink way too much coffee. Coffee is actually really good for your health if you drink anywhere from maybe, let's say, 3 to 4 cups a day. Anything more, some people say could be harmful. And people who don't drink coffee, some doctors have actually gone and said, and some research has proven, that actually a daily cup of coffee is really beneficial. So since it's such a popular item, I just wanted to kind of go over a basic introduction of what coffee is, because most people actually don't know where it comes from or the process that it takes to go from the farm to your cup. So it's really simple. You start off with these beautiful trees and you have what they call these coffee cherries. So it's an actual fruit. So growers will pick this coffee cherry. Once they have the coffee cherry, they then pass it on to millers. Millers will make the coffee fruits pass through this process that removes the fruity kind of layer it has on top of its seed. That seed is then dried. Only then does that become an actual coffee bean. The coffee bean, once dried, is then put through various different types of processes, including roasting, and that's why you usually have a light roast, a bold roast, a medium roast, an extra dark roast. Once you have that dried coffee bean, you then have to roast it. So this is when things get a bit more complicated. This is why you will have different flavor profiles of coffee, simply because of how long they were roasted, at what heat, for what amount of time, what color do they end up being, and eventually all that leading up to what does the coffee actually taste like when it's brewed. Once you have a selected roasted bean, how do you then get into this packaging right here? Well, it depends. When you see blend written on a package, it's usually a combination of different beans. You see, beans are quite similar to wines in a sense where the terroir, or where it was grown, is super important. Same thing for beans. You have different types of varieties of coffee fruit that are then categorized and graded into different types of beans that are then mixed with each other. So you can understand how confusing this gets, especially when you look into specialty coffee. So then what matters there is the roast, the aroma, the blend, where it was grown, and then how it's put together. And then eventually, how do you make it actually turn into coffee? Brewing it, roasting it, putting it in an espresso machine, putting it in a French roast, AeroPress. There's so many different ways, and all of that would extract different flavors from those beans. So we finally have a bean selection that we're ready to use. We then put it in packets. We then have to process it depending on how you're going to brew them at home. The most popular coffee that you will find in the Philippines is instant coffee, these little packets, or in these glass jars right here. Instant coffee is actually not a bean anymore. Instant coffee is coffee that was brewed, so you actually have liquid form coffee that is then either freeze-dried or pass through some really, really hot air to then turn the liquid into powder. So what you're doing when you're adding water to instant coffee, you're literally just adding liquid to an extremely intense form of dried coffee. The second most popular one is ground coffee, which is basically the beans ground into this very kind of fine powder that you can then add with cold water or hot water, depending on the type of coffee, having to leave it a couple of minutes. If it's cold water, usually a couple of hours sometimes, or even overnight, to then produce a strained coffee liquid. Third most popular is usually these pods. You need a machine. This is as close as you can get to an espresso machine. You take these pods with already ground coffee that has been roasted and ground to an exact size of grain that's needed for that machine, placed in the machine, extracted with high pressure water to give you that espresso kind of consistency. And finally, my favorite are whole beans. Now, if you're lucky enough to have an espresso machine at home or to have a grinder or even a manual grinder, whole beans for me are the best because you can really select the type of beans that you want. You can make a blend eventually, and then you can process it the way you want it. Now that we covered those basics, let's talk about decaf. So different people will get hit with various levels of caffeine. I'm the type of person, I can drink an espresso at night, like at midnight, and fall asleep right away. It actually doesn't keep me up anymore. The caffeine doesn't really affect me anymore. But some people are actually highly sensitive to caffeine, and that's why you have decaf coffee. To make decaf coffee, the process actually starts at the bean. So instead of getting a bean that's on its way to almost being ripe to make your coffee, you're actually taking a seed that is green, so a green coffee bean that is then hit with various types of solvents after being steamed for a while, and it's going to be hit with solvents multiple times to try to remove as much caffeine as possible. The bean eventually needs to be 99% caffeine free. That is the actual rule before you can label anything decaf. I personally am not a fan of decaf coffee simply because I feel like the flavor isn't full-bodied there. I feel like those solvents maybe extract some of the flavor, and it's not my favorite thing to drink, but I totally understand those who have problems with acidity or problems with caffeine sensitivity. We could go on forever, especially when comparing commercial grade coffee versus specialty coffee. There's a huge rise in popularity of third wave coffee currently, and it can get extremely geeky and interesting. And so if you're one of those people who wants to know more about it, go ahead and research online or even talk to your local baristas at the coffee shop. That's the best way to do it. They will probably know so much more than I do, but hopefully what I gave you today helps you out. See you guys.